Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whichever part of the world and whatever time zone you are joining us from. Welcome. Welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival's weekend of conversations about reparations, claiming what is rightfully ours, 185,435 days late and trillions short. The Black Consciousness Festival is a global online platform for the commemoration, celebration, and sharing of vital histories and stories that boost the awareness and impact of the pride, power, and practice of people of African descent. Our inaugural year was the magical and historical 2020, where we curated a month of conversations and activities around topics of Black consciousness. Earlier in 2021, we had our youth festival, and now our weekend of conversations on reparations. The Black Consciousness Festival is continuing the building of awareness around how each of us can take the necessary steps for restitution, healing, and the reparation repair. You can find more on the festival at our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. My name is Ivo Janelle Grant Williams, and as a part of the Black Consciousness Festival team, I am humbled to introduce today's conversation. Today, we present a conversation entitled The Path to Progress, Reconciliation, and Closure. This conversation will be led by Whitney Amanda Horsham. Whitney is a proud Florida A&M University alum and Black Girl Magic enthusiast with over 12 years of experience working with children and families in nonprofit organizations and international schools. She has completed 6 dynamic years in 4 countries as a K-12 social, emotional, and career and college counselor, curating therapeutic and creative spaces to support and encourage student development. As a first-generation Trinidadian American, she is deeply passionate about teaching young people how to love and believe in themselves, despite what the world may say. We thank you for joining or tuning in on our Zoom webinar or live Facebook stream. Feel free to post anything you hear that touches you, and make sure to tag us on Facebook and Instagram. Turning it over now to Whitney, who will share space with our esteemed guest panelists. Enjoy.
Thank you, Ivo. Thank you so much for that. Well, I'm going to introduce our incredible panel. I feel extremely honored and humbled to be a part of this incredible conversation and all of these conversations that have been going on, and now to be able to share this space with our panelists. So first we have Bruno Brito. He's an English teacher at Escolinha, Maria Felipa, a part of the private school system in Brazil. The school is located in Salvador, Bahia, in Brazil. The Afro-Brazilian school arose from an idea of young Black men and women who wanted to educate their daughters and sons using materials from other cultures and civilizations. The school aims to value African and indigenous ancestral ideas and traditions, not only European and sociocultural formation. Bruno studied English and English literature at the Catholic University of Salvador, and now teaches English at the Escolinha Maria Felipa. His research interests include the English language as a lingua franca and the application of race and ethnicity-based content to the teaching of English. Next, we have Maria Prudhomme. She's an educator within the primary school system in Trinidad and Tobago. She has recently completed her Bachelor of Education at the University of the West Indies. Congratulations, Maria. She has a lot of experience working with students who will be considered underperformers in the education system. Her love and passion for teaching is evident in her teaching practice. And last but of course not least, we have Tai Sena. She's an English teacher and content coordinator at Ebony English. She's a graduate in foreign trade, but she never actually worked in the field because her passion has always been for education. She is currently an undergraduate student in pedagogy at the Federal University of Sao Paulo In 2021, she also joined La Royer Research Group, where she studies revolutionary pedagogy. So thank you guys for joining us. And as a part of the tradition or ritual to start off our conversation, I want to ask all of us, our panelists, and including myself, to share a quote. I would say it should be a quote from someone who has made an impact on you, or it could be a quote that's always stuck with you, right? So my quote would be my grandmother, who has always taught me about the art of diplomacy and what you say. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And she'd always say, words are like bees. They can create honey or they could sting, and you get to decide what your words will do. And that's always stuck with me. And of course, being a Black woman, I have to choose my words very carefully in many, many spaces. And that's always carried me through as a really great reminder. So I would start with Maria. Do you have a quote that you'd want to share?
Yes, I do. Actually, this is not necessarily from someone older, but it was my father. He always had a way of saying everything was small thing. Right? So you have to put up a wall, small thing, you know? And that concept kind of carried me through with everything. So like school, you have an assignment due and you're late, small thing, you know? Traffic, small thing. You know, some calamity happens, small thing. So that of itself carried me through in everything that I had to do. It made me watch huge mountains like as tiny little molehills.
I love that. It's the Trinidadian version of don't sweat the small stuff. Small thing.
Yeah, small thing.
Hey, not the end of the world. Awesome.
Correct.
Thaís?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a quote, really. Maybe it's more of a piece of advice, I guess. But my mom has always told me, and that was based on her background, which is the reason why it's so valuable to me, that I should do whatever it is that I love. So this is the reason why, for example, I studied foreign trade at first, because at the same time she told me that, I was also her daughter. So she was like, please pick something to do and just go with it. And I did, and I hated. And then I told her about it, and now she's retired, but she used to be a public servant. And there were moments when we had this conversation on whether or not I would do the same thing. And she never really told me do that or she would just try to give me, to let me make my own decisions, basically. But then ultimately she just said, it seems like you're struggling with that, but it's not really because of you. So I'm just going to tell you what I think. And I don't think you should do that, because you should just go after something that you love doing. So she has always been very supportive. And even though I have always wanted to be a teacher from when I was a little kid, I struggled to finally make that decision, because the people in my family would be like, you're the smart one. Why would you want to be a teacher? Teachers are poor. Pick something else. So when I told her about it, she was like, there is no way you are going to be a teacher because you have no patience, but I support you 100%. So that was very valuable to me.
Supporting your child has to be the most important and most difficult thing for parents. Not that parents don't want to support their children, but there's something about wanting the absolute best, and sometimes they lose sight of letting you make your own decisions and own choices. So that kind of empowerment and trust takes you a really long way. So I'm glad your mom did that, because now you're here with us. Because I don't know what to talk about foreign trade, Thaís. Let me tell you, they would not have called me for that conversation. And Bruno, do you have?
Yes. Thaís, I just want to say that we can share feelings. The same happened to me.
Esse sentimento.
Proverb. It's an African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it has a lot to do with the work that I do and with the topic of this conversation. You know, yeah, it takes a village to raise a child, and it means it takes a community of people to interact and create a safe and healthy environment for our kids.
Absolutely. Bruno, thank you for sharing that. It's so relevant to our conversation today, right? Like, absolutely. So I'm going to start off this continue the conversation, I should say, with a question more personal, less about the topic, but more personal. Bruno, what would you say are your intersections? Like, what makes you who you are? What makes up Bruno?
Okay. Yes. What makes Bruno? I'm an Afro Brazilian teacher, and I am a homosexual, and you know that I am from the favelas in Salvador. Perovais is this neighborhood that I come from. I was born and raised in Perovais. Yes, it's close to one of the blackest neighborhood in Salvador. And yes, a black Afro homosexual Brazilian teacher.
Many sections. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. Thaís?
Well, I am a Black woman, and I have also been born and raised in the suburbs in São Paulo. So I guess this is a major part of who I am. But at the same time, as I said, my mom is a public servant. So there are some experiences that I discuss with my Black friends and students, for example, or even with my brother. I have a brother who's 9 years older than me, and there are situations that he has struggled with my mom that I don't share, because by the time I was born, she had kind of already established a part of her life. So even though we were never in good terms of our financial life, which means like we were never able to, say that we could do whatever we wanted, or I never struggled I've never faced the experiences that my brother has and that we discuss and that other members of my family have. But my father's family is also from the Northeast. So my grandmother, my whole father's family really is from Bahia too. And even though we have this strong connection to Bahia, there is this idea that because we have a big Black population in Salvador, there is prejudice in São Paulo and all over the country, really, with people who came from the Northeast. So I guess that makes my intersections.
Those very layered experiences, absolutely. Even within a sibling relationship, there's many differences and things that kind of pull you in different directions. Thank you for sharing that. And Maria?
So what would I say? In short terms, I'll say I'm a pilau, right? For those who know what pilau is, that's like rice and chicken and peas and vegetables all mixed up. That's what we call it in Trinidad, pilau. So I'm quite mixed up. My grandfather on my mother's side was half African, half Chinese. And then my father's side of the family being Prudhomme, they are French, right? And then you have my grandmother, which is Spanish. So therefore, I'm quite a pilau, quite a mixed pot, right? Similar to like what Thaís was just sharing with us, is that I'm the older sibling. So there are things my younger sister wouldn't know either, and I must say, because I've experienced those things, I'm a lot stronger and a lot better now. And I'm grateful for it. And also I'm grateful for the fact that my sister didn't have to go through it as well. So yeah. So that I'm also a teacher, I'm an educator. And like Thaís said, teachers are not the richest, but yeah.
No, I always tell people no one goes into education for the money or the
No,
money.
it has to be the love.
It has to be. It absolutely has to be. I definitely love that. Palau that cracks me up. So thank you for sharing that. I asked that question because I feel like conversations like these, it's really important to understand the lens or lenses that people are discussing this topic through, because it can be quite an intense conversation. It can foster a lot of different emotions, and I always think it's important for us to ground ourselves in remembering like who we are, what direction we're coming from. We've already been discussing quite frequently that we're educators, education, and wanting to tie those two things in. So for me, I am Black woman. I am first generation American, so my family is from Trinidad, but I was born in America, which was already a very interesting and kind of isolating experience, where you're being raised by people who do not understand the space in which they're raising you from the context or from the angle of you, right? So they know America from an adult perspective. Most of them were adults by the time they got to America. But then there's me, you know, trying to figure it out, hold true to the traditions, hold true to the culture, but then find my own way. Coming from a homogenous country, their idea of Blackness was very different than what was kind of projected on me when I was growing up. So I often felt very like confused, like, who am I, and why am I viewed one way at home and another way outside in the world? So my lens, of course, is very American at its root, and then Caribbean. And then my global experience kind of adds layers to it, which I have to fight daily to address bias, to address preconceived notions, things of that nature, to address my own privilege. So it's been quite a really interesting experience. But it also leads me to my next question, which is going to come from more of an American perspective, but I welcome you to assign your perspective to it. So in the United States, there's like a very intense and bitter history with slavery. Obviously, it's the origin of the country. I always tell people when I travel, like, the country was founded on theft and rebellion. So, what else would you expect from America? But slavery is the foundation of the country's success and where they are now. So there's countless spaces that have benefited from the slave trade and slave labor, including many of the educational spaces like universities, post-secondary education. And some campuses so far have attempted to atone or to make amends or to apologize for their role and what they've benefited from through slavery. But nothing has been like groundbreaking or anything like that. So it begs the question to me, what does education overall, not just in America, but education globally, what does education owe Black people? And anybody can answer. I'm not gonna call names.
All right. So for me, what I would say is, well, in the Caribbean and in Trinidad, I would say it owes us telling the truth, right? It owes us going back and, how should I say, rewriting textbooks, changing texts, because I think yesterday it was either Dr. Hunt or Shubaka that was mentioning that we need to reinstate the history in our textbooks, really tell the true story of what it is. And not us glorifying Christopher Columbus, but more of telling the truth of what really happened. Because what I would say is my journey between primary school to university, here is where I realized, okay, this is not the truth. This is not the truth. This is not the truth. Even English, you realize you have a whole cross-section of English gets more academic as you continue. And I'm like, so why didn't teach me this in the beginning? And it's the same thing with history and the truth. Like, I think we need to really and truly rewrite texts, really and truly teach the truth, really and truly allow people and everybody to be their original self, because here we teach a lot of colonial things without even recognizing it, and I think it's only when we rewrite it, then we would necessarily know the truth.
Thank you, Maria. I really appreciate that the very simple response of the truth, right? Like when you really think about how history has been presented globally and how much sugar they have poured into the aspect of colonization to make it this almost like cultural thing. Like it just feels very gentle, like, oh, and they even being here, like even today we're having a conversation. I was having a conversation with a Dutch man who collects stamps from different countries, and he was explaining to me that he has to keep the country separate by when they were colonized. So you know, the Dutch, the Spanish, the British, and then when the countries found their independence, that's when he creates the envelope for their country. So absolutely telling the truth and not making it this very like saccharine and sweet aspect of being very honest with human beings, with any people, all people, about the roles that were played and what has happened is definitely an amazing place to start. Anyone else about what education owes Black people?
Yes, in Brazil, Maria mentioned the textbooks, the works full of coloniality. The same happens in Brazil, you know, especially history books. They never tell the truth. There was an Africa that was full of scientists, artists, queens, kings. For example, mathematics in Africa, there was an idea of mathematics. Mathematics is not a European thing, you know. The Shango bone papyrus tell us there was already mathematics, and you know the education always Black people the truth. Okay, our history did not start from the slavery trade. There wasn't a history before that.
I think there are so many layers to this question. I completely agree with what Maria and Bruno said. And even though I agree, that's not how I planned on starting my answer. So this is why I'm thinking that there are so many layers to this. So, but since they mentioned this, the right to the truth, this brings me at first to the idea that we try to implement at Ebony, which is to bring us as the center of the conversation. So text, books are just this very important part of children's education. And I was actually preparing for our conversation, and my advisor in Laroyer, Professor Ellen Souza, she suggested that I read this text about Nilma Gomes that talks about how it's about social justice and also cognitive justice. And she talks about how unaware we are on children's perspective, really. And it's about treating children as individuals, so treating them individually. That's why I'm struggling between children and child, because it's about seeing them as a child, not the child, as we are often discussing. And at the same time, how aware they are of what it means to be Black and what it means to be white. So this text talks about how early they develop this sense of wanting to become white when they are not introduced to books where they can see themselves, and how important it is to discuss race rather than just discussing racism, because we simply associate the ideas and we think that discussing racism is enough when it comes to discussing race, when it obviously isn't. So I think there are so many different ways to answer this question and to address this conversation as well. So I'm thinking about this book I read. I'm trying to remember the author, but I think it's Renee something, but it's a teenage book, I think. It's called Piecing Me Together. And it's an amazing book that talks about how it's a Black teenager who gets a scholarship in a private school. And she is always seen as this child who needs an opportunity. So every time every time people look for her, they just look for her because they want to offer her an opportunity. And the book is written in the first person. So she begins the book by sharing this experience and saying, I just wish I had an opportunity to show how I can help others instead of just being the person who needs help. So I think there's just, and at the same time, I think one thing that I actually wanted to add on my intersections, and that I believe is also connected to your last question, is that in my family, there are many women who are teachers before me. So even though my mom's not one of them, I have an aunt called Elena. For us, she's Eleninha, but she has worked in a school her entire life, and she has always been this incredible reference to me. She still is, and she is a teacher in kindergarten. So we are always sharing ideas and perspectives on what it's like to raise and to educate Black children. And that brings me to this book. I was actually looking for the name in English because I read it in Portuguese and I never thought of the name in English, but it's a Bell Hooks book called Teaching to Transgress, where she talks about the importance of children, actually the female teachers, and how aware they were of the importance of them being there to teach these children during segregation. And I think this is important because she talks about the technical details on segregation, but she also shares her experience because she lived through that. So she talks about how different it is to think about a place where we don't have segregation to a desegregated place, which is how she refers to the experience she had in school after segregation ended. So when she had those Black teachers, they were always, all the children were encouraged to think and learn and were seen as human beings, not someone who was to become a human being, but a human being in their age as a child. And after segregation ended, they had to join white schools, and that completely changed. So from students who were encouraged to ask, they found themselves in these situations where they were seen as dangerous when they had something to ask and something to say. And I think this is very important to think about the descriptions, the adjectives we add to children without even thinking about how important they can be, because we sometimes refer to Black children as shy, for example, when they're not really shy. They just want to remain unseen so that they are not seen as dangerous. So
absolutely, excellent point. I really like what you said about bringing people to the center of the conversation, bringing Black people to the center of the conversation, and then tying that together with humanizing children, right? I think a lot of the time, even I work with really young kids now, so they're from the ages of 8 to 11, and I have to constantly remind myself that they're human beings with feelings and perspectives and thoughts that need to be acknowledged and honored and respected and empowered. And yes, we are responsible for kind of moving them around and keeping them safe and guiding them and facilitating the learning, but they're in charge of their learning. They should be in charge of their learning. So I want to kind of tie in what you said with Bruno's background, right? Bruno, you work in a school that has a really unique and incredible approach and ethos. And what Thaís was saying about bringing Black people to the center of the conversation, what Maria was saying about let's tell the truth, let's rewrite it. Do any of those aspects of what they share tie into what you do in your day-to-day?
Oh, is this a question for me?
So I was saying like what Thaís and Maria were saying about bringing Black people to the center of the conversation and understanding what is owed to us through education. That reminded me of what your field of education actually does, where we move away from the Eurocentrism of education, which is also like the decolonization, and what Maria was saying about telling the truth, and what you were saying about let's start talking about what actually happened. And then what Thaís was saying about we're centering Black people and centering the children. How does that speak to what you do at your school?
Okay, yes. In Maria Felipa school, we do not tell our children what is racist and what is not racist. We just tell them the history before the slavery, okay? So they can construct self-esteem, okay? So they can look back and see my story did not start from slavery, okay? There was teacher, there was kings, queens, scientists in Africa. And yes, the school curriculum is also designed to respect the social, cultural, and the historical context, as well the identity of every black child that studies in the school. Yes, and we also value the Afro religions, okay, like Candomblé. Despite of being in Salvador, there's a huge prejudice against Afro-Brazilian religions. Yes, and it's kind of so crazy because, you know, it's a black city, okay, we should embrace it, but we still live coloniality every day. So at Maria Felipa school, we just move beyond it, okay? For example, behind me, it's a picture of Oshumare, and it's an orisha that is related to snakes and the rainbow. So I can tell my kids the story of Oshumare, okay, like a deity, and how related to rainbow, and I can teach them colors use the rainbow and the story of Oshumare.
That's wonderful. I love that, like the simplicity of it, where it becomes ingrained in the curriculum. Like it's not this outlandish or out of the curriculum aspect where you're like grabbing for things and trying to be creative. It's like really embedding something that is so central to history, that is not beyond or outside of their grasp, that they can tie it together with the things that they need to learn and the things that they need to learn and put it together. I love that.
Nice. And I learned a lot from that. I'm always researching and studying so I can give my best for my students. Yeah. And it's amazing. I love doing that.
Yeah. You know what's also really amazing that Bruno said is that something I try to do with my students all the time. Don't matter, because like I was in preschool or kindergarten for like about 8 years, and then I moved into primary school, which is like the same age, 7. I'm teaching second year, so that's like 7, 8, 9, around that bracket there. But what I try to always do is bring forward everything if we're teaching a topic. So for example, I'm teaching emancipation. I bring forward everything. I'm looking for the music, I'm looking for the clothes, I'm looking for the food, I'm looking for everything to show them. We're talking about spiritual Baptists. Sure, I will play some orishas, I will play everything for them, you know, and they'll be like, wow, miss, this music is nice. Everything that I talk about, as much as the textbook has, it's just pretty simple. I bring everything to real life. So sometimes I might need a car to go to school with, because I have to now I want to ask somebody for a part, to ask somebody for this, to really bring to life the whole teaching aspect so that they get to know. And everything that they're exposed to is also a teaching opportunity. you know. So as much as we could show them colors, they could learn textures, they could taste, you know, and that's what I think has to be done in whatever we teach. And in teaching, you should bring everything to life. And everything is a learning opportunity.
Definitely, absolutely. Using real life, tangible resources, really. Like, I can't even imagine. How do you say resources in Portuguese?
Fontes. Recursos?
It could be fontes too, yeah.
Okay, I don't know a teacher who doesn't use the word resources. Like, I don't at all. It's like, it feels like our holy grail, like resources. And with resources, I oftentimes feel like it's access and money, which brings us to the idea, again, of reparations. So I know that with when you hear the word reparations, I always believe, or I always think of money. What do you think of when you hear the word reparations?
For me, reparation is doing something to fix something that is not correctly. I mean, it's looking back to the past to see what is wrong and what is exactly affecting the present day, then start working to fix it. And as you said, it's not only about money, payment, okay? Yeah, there is the money component, but it's much more than this. It's about shifting the access, change the norms, form new structures, and practice and re-educating people. So yeah, so we can make a better world. People living without discrimination and inequality.
Yeah, I think it's about living with dignity, really. So I remember that we briefly talked about that last week, and I talked about this journalist called Flávia Oliveira, who talks about the fact that she was raised in a poor community, and that she has one child and she has one daughter, and her daughter didn't go, because now she's an adult, didn't go through the same experience she did, because she was in a better place financially, and she moved to a different neighborhood. And that also brings other perspectives, she says, because even though she was able to leave from a place where she considered to have lots of great memories as she grew up, she also understood that it was a place that brought vulnerabilities because of the lack of reparation from the state. And so she thought she was doing the right thing. And then her daughter also shares the experience of being the only Black kid in that neighborhood where they lived. And but the thing is, she says that she does not know one Black woman, and I sympathize with her answer, who does not help the community when she's able to move to a more comfortable position. So we are always paying for a medical insurance, or we're paying for a private school to someone else in the family, or just doing whatever we can. And this is not an experience. I think it's a dialogue between what Bruno said, which is the fact that it takes a village to raise a child, but it shouldn't take one person to be responsible for so many people, for the entire community. And so I think this is not something that is common to white people, which makes it even hard to have this conversation sometimes. And this is not living with dignity, because if we had reparations, we wouldn't have to, we would be able to think about the future. We often talk about how we are not prepared to have financial planning and talk about finances within our community. But the truth is, sometimes we just don't have what to save or how to plan, because it doesn't matter how much we make. We always know that there is someone in our family who needs our help. So when we think about, should I make some future planning with that, or should I just help someone in my family who's maybe thinking about starting a business? So this is why I think it's so connected, and it's not only related to money, because it's about living with dignity, and it's something that the lack of reparation has made us not being able to do so far.
Amazing points. Thank you, Thaís.
For me, it's a bit of us having to renew, repair, and kind of like reconstruct and recreate what we already taught. You know, because it's not, as we keep saying, it's not necessarily just about the money, but it has the emotional aspects to it, the mental aspects. And because of that lack, we now have, how should I say, an underlying thought of what we think is true, you know, and we now have to shift into recreating what is the truth, shift to recreating and healing from necessarily the trauma, you know, and it's not to say, like, for example, we went through the trauma, but for example, our ancestors. And funny enough, because of the trauma that they would have went through, it automatically gets passed down generation to generation. And these things now become like our habits and quote unquote our traditions, when really and truly it was something based on trauma, not necessarily something that we just started doing and find that, okay, this is good. You know, it's because they went through this and they don't want us to go through it. So therefore, they kind of recreated it to make it as in something we have to do. A simple thing like combing your hair. You know, like, your hair is so nice with me, like I love it, you know. And even like, for example, I have a rasp, and I remember when I told my grandmother I wanted to do it, and my whole family, they're like, are you mad? Are you crazy? You cannot do that. And they really got on, and I'm like, but why? It's just hair. You know, if today or tomorrow I decide I could cut it off and I can start again, you know. And they're like, no. And then is when I really dig deep. Okay, they're going to be judged, you're going to be criticized, you're going to be watched a particular way, somebody mightn't hire you for interview because you have a rasp, you know. And I was like, you know what, to hell with this, I'm going to do it, you know. I don't know if I have been judged or criticized or be denied anything, but at the end of the day, for me, it's a whole recreating of what we know, you know, and healing. Because I can tell you, not because I have a rasp doesn't mean I didn't finish university, I didn't go to school, I don't have a job, I'm a teacher now, I educate others. That doesn't stop me from doing anything, you know. So for me, it's a whole repair in terms of what we were taught, right? And to go forward and now teach others what's correct. So we have to now recreate a whole new generation of thoughts and emotions.
Definitely. I love that, where we're talking about like the reconstruction of it, like, and some of it ties back to what you were saying earlier, Maria, about telling the truth. If we tell the truth about our origin, what Bruno was sharing, that our history didn't start with slavery. Our history didn't start when colonization or colonizers showed up to our shores. It didn't start then. And understanding how to love ourselves and how to respect ourselves, and then tying into what has to happen next. So kind of looking in the past to know what to do in the future. And Thaís, you made a point about the idea of supporting, like, it takes a village to raise a child, community. I think where we as Black people get the short end of the stick per se, or we end up in a more complicated situation, is because I have a professor at FAMU. He's my favorite professor, Dr. Denard. And I remember him giving us this sheet that kind of outlined what the diaspora represents, right? So African people globally, we are communal. We operate under a matriarchy, and all these words, these kind of buzzwords that we use, and he would explain it. But when I reflect on that, when I think about growing up, that I was, my grandmother was in the house with me, and in our culture, there was never an idea of like an old folks home. Like, you know, I'd watch television and be like, they just send their grandma to a house by herself? Like, that sounds awful. We take care of each other. Or the idea of like, I'm moving out when I'm 18 because I'm an adult. And I remember talking to my mom about that. She's like, 18 to go where? With who? Like, what? Like, no, this is not how we operate. So when you think about how interconnected we are with our families and our communities, then the idea of supporting each other is natural. It's inherent. We can't separate that from ourselves. But when you talk about the trauma that Maria is talking about, the self-loathing and the hatred and the violence that we've experienced, not us personally, but generational trauma, then that creates this really nasty, perfect storm of us never being able to plan ahead, like Thaís was saying. We're never able to consider the resources or ask for what we need, because we know that whatever we get has to go to somebody else because we're all we have. And the idea of reparations is not just monetary, of course, we'll keep saying that, but it's this idea of equity and opportunity. And Bruno mentioned the word access. Access is so key. And if we're going to keep kind of muddling it down to just the money, it completely cheapens, no pun intended, the conversation overall. They don't understand how integral it is for us to have this, because without the idea of reparations, it's going to be us kind of pouring water into a bucket with a tiny little hole in it.
I mean, you said it all.
No, I do. I think it's what you guys have been saying has been absolutely incredible. And I often wonder, I think that conversations like this and the Black Consciousness Festival overall, like hearing all these different perspectives and ideas about this topic in particular, always for me begs the question, like, okay, if we know all this, if we know all of this from our own little corners of the world, why not? Why is it not happening? And I guess that's my next question. Why is it not happening?
Two things I would say. One, I think I'm going to speak about this to my children tomorrow morning, because we always have this conversation when we on a Monday. So what did you do for the weekend? So sometimes when I ask them first, but depending on when they sign on, well, you know, we're on online school. When they sign on, they're like, so miss, wait, could you tell us what you did this weekend? So I think I'm going to make this a topic. But anyway, I think there is a fear factor. I think there is a how would I look, you know, and not necessarily realizing that we are a community. Because sometimes, you know, you could feel so alienated or so isolated. Is it just me that's going to stand up? You know, am I going to have anybody behind me? You know, and I think that happens a lot of the times with us. You know, am I going to be standing here alone, or do I have the courage to stand here alone by myself until others come? You know, and I think that's what is happening. That's why, you know, as much as there's conversations in a lot of places, there's still a lot of fear, as in people are thinking, will I be looked down against? Will I be quote unquote cancelled? You know, what will they say about me? What will they say about us? You know, and you don't want to have to go through that, or how should I say, recreate that whole hate and war and that fear, that you just stay to yourself, you have little small conversations, and we go back to what, and although some of us will really be trying to change the aspect of everything that's going on, we will do our little part to do change. But I think there's a lot of fear.
I definitely agree with you there. Like the idea of like on our end of like, I feel like reparations is like a dirty word, right? Like where you say it and it's like, ooh, I said that, reparations, ooh. And it's also, I think, in another conversation we've had before with Sean, he was saying, like, if they had to tally up what they owe, trillions of dollars, how many hundreds of thousands of days late, like, guys, like, to me, I feel like the conversation of reparations in an ideal world would start with white people, where you have to walk through the halls of your universities watching murals of slavery, walking under awnings with slave owners' names on it, and you don't owe them anything? Nothing at all? I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. For example, if you come to Brazil and see who are the people who are doing reparations, they are exactly Black people. Black people are doing reparations for Black people, and the ones who should be doing it, they are not doing it.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about that. That's true.
Yeah. For example, the woman who is behind Maria Felipa School is a Black woman who came from the favelas, and she came from a poor family. Yeah, she had to study hard, to work hard until she had the school.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, Bruno. That's an excellent point. Like, we're all sitting here having this conversation about reparations, and I feel like we might be missing some people to involve in this conversation. It's like preaching to the choir, like, yeah, well, Thaís, what do you think about reparations? It's like, well, girl, let me tell you about all the books that I've read to educate myself, all the education that I've sought out to educate myself, all the education I'm providing to people who look like me. We're doing the work. Like, then how do we get it? How do we do this? Like, how do we expand it beyond talking to ourselves, basically?
I think sometimes we are used to having some sort of conversations about specific things in our own bubble. And we sometimes forget that the world is not exactly as the people we often speak with. So in my experience, I work in a Black school where the owners are Black, all of the employees are Black, all of the students are Black. I study in a federal university, and federal universities in Brazil by law are forced to save 50% of their positions for affirmative actions, not only to Black people, but that already significantly changes the scenario, the people I have contact with in the university. And I am also part of a research group that studies Black childhood. So I am so used to having these conversations every day that sometimes things that might seem so obvious to us, just I forget that they are not so obvious to other people. And then at the same time, I remember when I decided after I became an adult that I really wanted to become a teacher, that I had made up my mind. I remember that I had this idea of isolation. I didn't really know what was going to happen. What is it that I was going to do? And I remember I'm not even sure I had this conversation. So I had a student at the school, at Ebony, the school I work for, with this woman who is now doing her PhD, but I was fortunate enough to meet her when she was still on graduation. Her name is Fernando Souza, and she just completely changed the perspective for me, because I saw her, and I remember many conversations she shared with the class as if it was yesterday. She talked about how isolated she felt because she's brilliant and she knows so much about Black literature, and she was going to the university, and none of the books she was reading were being mentioned in her classes, to the point where she had to stand up and talk to the professor about it. And then the professor said, well, can you talk about these books? Can you? And even though it's this idea of like, well, at least it happened, right? At least the professor gave her the chance of doing that. At the same time, I just keep thinking it shouldn't come from her. Like, you should know this. What about all of the students who came before you? And then this is why I started by saying that when I decided I wanted to be a teacher, I was sure I wanted to work in a school, with an elementary school or something like that. But then having all of these conversations just led me to realize that even though I wanted to be in contact with children, and I am now in Ebony, and it's my favorite part of my job, they bring me joy, and I think this matters more than almost everything. But then there is this one thing that I can't lose sight of, which is the fact that it's important to me individually to affect this small group of people. And it's a huge, even though it's a small group of people, it's a huge work, I believe. But at the same time, if we don't have these ideas implemented through social movements, in laws, in regulations, we are not going to see real change. We might see it in our bubble, and we might be able to talk to our friends about it, but at the same time, we will not be able to share this experience, the experience we have here in São Paulo and in Salvador and in other states of Brazil, and really throughout the world, because we know that this is a global struggle.
For sure. Thank you, Thaís. That brings us to our last and final part of this conversation, which I'm a little bummed out for saying I didn't want it to end. I'm like, oh my God, is it almost over? This is terrible. So you were talking about like how we're making an impact in our smaller bubble and a little microcosm, but then considering what needs to happen to expand it globally. And that definitely is a perfect segue to my last check-in question for you guys. What can we do as educators, as panelists, as people viewing these conversations? What advice would you give to future educators to help foster the conversation and keep it going, less in a conversational way, but more in an active way about reparations, particularly how it ties into education? What advice would you give?
Well, I would say get to know your history, but not only your history, get to know your students' history and get to know your students. And this is something that I learned from the content I've been using recently, ever since I joined Laroyer, which is the Revolutionary Pedagogy by Molefe Assange. And I didn't even know this book. My professor, who's also my advisor, Fernando Souza, she introduced me to this book. And it is just amazing to think. It's actually a book that is thought to educate teachers. So it's thought of for Black children, but throughout the book, he shares this experience as something that all of the teachers should know, because what he says is the idea is not that you shouldn't learn about different cultures. You should, but once you get to know about your history and your culture, it doesn't really matter what you know about the other ones, because you embrace your own, you embrace your history and what is true to you. So I would say that this is the essence of it all. Get to know your history, because we can't go much further than that if we don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Thais, for saying it all. Yes, that's it. I also believe that the key, the key is get to know your history, okay, and embrace your past, okay, get to know your past. So be aware of identity, so you can help young kids or young learners, kids, to learn and construct a strong identity.
Absolutely, Bruno. I love that idea of like fostering the space and knowledge to help others create their identity and connect to that. Because that's the empowerment, right? That's how you know to look for what you need and take it or get it. And having that confidence and knowledge, like what Thais was saying, the information, knowing your history, and then having the confidence and the ability to go for it. Maria?
You know what's also really funny, and Bruno said it, and Thais kind of said it as well, is that my mom used to always say, you need to know who you are and where you came from to know where you're going. You know, because in secondary school, I really didn't like history at all. You know, I'm like, oh my goodness, these are a lot of books, you know, to be reading. But she's like, no, you need to know who you are. And she'd always share stories. You need to know who you are to be able to know where you're going. So I think, as they both said, you know, educate yourself first, know yourself. Don't be afraid to dive into the culture of the students in your class or the children that you're educating. Get to know them as well. But then also don't be fearful and just limit yourself to what textbooks have and to what the curriculum has. If you have to spice up the way you're going to teach, spice up what you need to do to make sure that the truth comes across all the time, you know, and then also not be fearful. Like if you speak up, you know, ask that tough question, you know, make that tough statement, because a lot of the times, a lot of us operate in fear, you know, and I think just like how the slogan says at the beginning, pride, power, and practice. And from the whole weekend, I've been feeling like, oh, I'm ready to go, you know. But it's really and truly in terms of always filling ourselves with that energy that we are powerful all the time, you know, and don't belittle ourselves. And I think once we fill ourselves with that power, we'll be able to transfer it onto our students, transfer it when we speak, transfer it when we teach, you know, and they too will be filled with that pride, okay, to accept, to know this is mine. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide. I don't need to straighten my hair. I don't need to cut my hair. I could be who I have to be, you know, and not be afraid, you know, and really get to know, okay, this is me. So I think that's what we need to do. At least that's what I'll be doing.
Well, Maria, you already said that first step is tomorrow. You're telling your students about this. And I definitely appreciate all of the input and all of the things that you guys have shared today. And it's exactly what you're saying, Maria, this reinvigoration. Like, I think, yeah, conversations like these, yeah, we're talking to each other about it. But I don't get to talk to a lot of people in person here about these topics, right? Like, you do have to be, I don't want to say cautious, but sometimes you don't feel like it. Like, I think it's the motivation is low. Like, you know, like, do I want to be the person that's educating white people about, you know, what is owed to Black people globally? Like, no, I think we're just going to talk about this white wine that we're drinking and why you should not use the word ghetto to describe things. We're just going to stick to that, right? We're going to stay right there, surface level. But conversations like these lead us into this like motivation of like, this is why we do this. Education is important. Those peaks and then the valleys of education where you're like, yeah, I'm going to change the world. And then, oh my God, why did I do this? I'm so tired. These conversations foster and fill that space. So I'm extremely grateful to you all for being so brave and sharing so much, and the resources. Oh my goodness, like, if anybody has like a book list going, let's get that going, like a book club or something.
Yeah, I wrote down the book sometimes, you know, like I'm gonna be looking for them, you know, to see if I could see them, look and see if they're on Audible. Are they on Audible, Thaís? To see if I can listen to them when I'm getting ready, you know. But it's really and truly what we need to do. Listen to things, have conversations, you know.
Yes. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I really really am just so impressed with the conversations, and I hope that everybody else was able to get something out of it, even if it's a little bit of zhuzh, like Maria.
Wow. Refreshed. Whew.
Can I still say something?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I just want to basically say the same thing that Whitney said, but just by to emphasize how important it is that we have these meetings and that we're able to see each other, even if it's just through screen, because this isolation idea is something that I've been noticing in so many different levels, like from my teenager students who are around 12 and go to private schools and are the only Black students in their class, to my advisor, who is a Black woman and a PhD and is a professor at the Federal University and doesn't really have that many professors and Black women to share her experience with. And this is something that also made a difference for me. I've been saying a lot of names, and I think that it's important that we do that. So when I became a teacher, I had no idea how far I could go. And then when I joined Ebony, this changed things for me completely. And I met this Black woman who is just like Winnie, totally into Black girls magic. She's like my sister now, and she is the best English teacher I know. So just by knowing that she existed, it made me feel like, okay, this is real and this is possible. So I think the Black Consciousness Festival is enabling us to do that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better, Thaís. Thank you so much. Eiffel, are you taking us out of here?
Yes, but I think Journey is going to say something first.
Well, actually, hi everyone, I'm Journey. I was just inviting you to thank them. Guys, amazing conversation. So Ival, you could take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Journey.
Of course.
Ooh, I'm going to say wow again. How refreshing. Oh my goodness. We are revitalized and reinvigorated and just everything energy right now. So much information and sharing, such authenticity without barriers or judgment. Just us, being human, learning and discussing as citizens of the land. Words alone can't express our gratitude. I mean, we really need food, music, language, and human touch to share and channel the energy and the love we feel towards everyone who participated and supported this year's Black Consciousness Festival. But in the meantime, while we wait for that grand day and opportunity, we say huge thanks to the Black Consciousness Festival team. You are amazing and selfless. Thank you to all those who participated in the conversations and gave up their time, their energy, their knowledge, and their honest perspectives. Ikemba, Youth Reparations Organization out of Guyana. Mr. Eric Phillips of the Guyana Reparations Commission. Alicia Bartels, who did our opening reading of SALT. ASD Media and Entertainment, for allowing us to use their short film entitled Reparations. Karen Marks Mafundikwa, for giving us permission to screen her documentary, The Price of Memory. The African Film Festival of Trinidad and Tobago, for collaborating with us. Our interpreters, oh my gosh, amazing. Carlos, Roberto, Daniela, Robinson, and John, you made sure every word was shared. Jamie Filbert and Bois Academy. Last but not least, our wonderful elder, Earl Lovelace, for being available to us. Have a good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and walk in pride, power, and practice.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Before we close, we just want to, really end it with an appreciation for all of the arts that have been involved in it, in the whole coming together, the festival. So before we continue, I want to invite Kiwi Copeland to read a poem called Identity.
This poem is entitled Identity. I'm alive, strong, healthy, powerful, not doubtful. Innovation, creation on their bright star, supporting peace against war. I am motivation, education, the right medication in the right situation, legs forward in deep meditation, beyond the stars is my destination. Forget frustration and hesitation, apply faith and aggression. I might be the new Bob Marley, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Maya Angelou, who knows? Because invested in me is the power to become whoever I want to be. With my eyes on what's priority, for I set my path, not society. Over my life, I have authority, living a life of serenity. Peace is what we should fight to acquire. Stay away from all the confusion and fire, drama, end this trauma. Stop crying, stop complaining, because your time is wasting. It's time to start pacing your challenges, to start facing. You're too calm, you need your adrenaline hot and your heart racing. Your dreams you need to start chasing and stop being caged in by what they say or what they think. What seems right or what seems to be the going thing, see with your own eyes. I'm not saying not to take advice, but process it with your own mind. Believe it with your heart. Before you can manifest anything in life, you first have to believe it before anyone else. Speak life into your life and stop being a walking dead. Whatever society feeds you, just stand there and nod your head. He said, she said. If this is how you intend to live, why live? Why live? Let your knowledge be guided by curiosity. Don't put all faith in everyone's philosophy, and be your own philosopher. Because what may work for you may not work for another. What may be good for your brother may not be good for a sister. What I'm trying to say, my brothers and sisters, is that we were all born different, unique. We might be similar in some ways, and we are for sure under the Supreme Being, one. But there's something about each one of us that differentiates us from everyone else. And with the billions of people on the face of this earth, isn't that remarkable? You see, life is what you make it. All the experiences of your days and nights are what you created with your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your philosophy. The main reason I wrote this poem was to make an imprint in your ideology. What is your identity? Identity, the individual characteristics by which a thing or person is recognized or known. Who are you? What are your values? What do you stand for or stand for not? What are your roots? Do you know your history or much less care? What is your vision, aspirations? You see, sadly but factually, 80% of the world are on autopilot and unable to answer the questions I've asked. But I'm not here to bash, but to help. For I leave judgment for the Almighty as an Afro-Guyanese. Make it one of my priorities to help break the chains of mental slavery. For these mental chains are worse than our chuckles and chains that cuffed our wrists and ankles, the whips that decorated our backs, the knife that castrated us, the force that raped us. It's our level of thinking, our philosophy, our beliefs. The truth of the matter is, we are mighty, made in the image and likeness of the Almighty. We are powerful, unstoppable, with a control over everything on the face of this earth, just like any other race. For under the divine universe, we are one. We are not just black, but black and proud, black and beautiful, black and intelligent, the original, most phenomenal, for I am not racist. I'm just concerned about my own. I'm concerned about my roots, concerned about my future generation, and you should too. Because if our ancestors were not concerned about our future, if they did not sacrifice and risk their lives to free us from slavery, today, who knows what have become of the African race. Thank you.
Wow, absolutely powerful. Wow. Amazing. And we'll continue with another powerful presentation by Jamie Filbert of Kalinda.
Colonization and the colonizers did not take into account the quantum memories and realities of magic the people they attempted to label as colonized people possessed. They did not take into account that those they assigned social and historical value to and imposed cultural identity on would retain a distinct vision of themselves. Imagine a vision branded so deeply into the skin and cells of ancestry, through which the voice of every mothering force in nature would repeatedly speak you into being. We people of the African Caribbean experience wind our way counterclockwise into fetes of revolution, praising our reimaginations through inversions of self. We share our pre-colonial oral traditions and use our sticks to stir cauldrons of ritual medicines that drum, sing, and dance healing into our inextinguishable futures. We are magic, and it has always been real. We are real, and it has always been magic.
Wow, absolutely amazing. And as I take you through the rest of the evening, we spoke about capoeira earlier. So for those of you who may not be aware of what it looks like, we want to show you a little bit of it from Capoeira Senzala, which is a group based in Trinidad, and another group called Cordal de Oro, who is based in Brazil. Absolutely fun. I play a little bit of capoeira and I don't look like that, but it's super fun. Anybody can get into it. So as we close off the evening, we'll just want to end with our theme song played by Ruth Osman and her band, See Them Come.
Hi everyone, we're so happy to be here and to be part of the Black Consciousness Festival. I'm Ruth Osman, this is Mr. Theron Shaw and Baba Onilu. We're going to be doing a piece that was composed specifically for this festival by myself, arranged by Terry. It's called See Them Come.
Absolutely beautiful. I love that song. I actually listen to my free time. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us here for Reparations Weekend, claiming what is rightfully ours, 185,435 days late and trillions short. Actually, right after this amazing session, we have a DJ funky, vibesy, Black empowering session with DJ Blase Vanguard. Who is DJ Blase Vanguard? He's a young DJ based in Trinidad and Tobago, and he's been DJing internationally since 2015. He has gone from Trinidad and Tobago to the UK, to Berlin, Barcelona, and Italy. And he is the true embodiment of a trailblazer of positive Caribbean expression, creativity, and attitude with all-inclusive sound. So if you want to jam, to get down, to vibes after this, definitely join us on our Instagram at the Black Consciousness Festival to jam with DJ Blase Vanguard. So thank you all once again for joining us, to our audience, to our panelists, our interpreters, to our full committee, our board, everyone who has been so instrumental in making this event possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so grateful. And remember, walk in pride, power, and practice. Thank you.